occupation as opposed to a protest. As I said, the police in our city are very used to handling large protests and large visits of state leaders and so on, but nothing of this magnitude has ever been seen, quite frankly, in any city that I'm aware of in Canada in the last 25 years.
So is it fair to say by Monday the 31st, after that first weekend when the majority of the trucks were still there, that's when you determined that they were not going to leave anytime soon? Thereabouts,
either whether it was the Monday or the Tuesday, and then certainly that was solidified in my mind that they weren't going to leave on the weekends when the weekends started to create this very tense situation where people were coming in from all over the region, and in fact, different parts of the country to come and support the protesters, and that's where the havoc and the chaos was created in our communities. What was happening was disgraceful. We had some people dancing on the tomb of the unknown soldier. We had other people urinating at the cenotaph. We had a group that went and stole meals from the Shepherds of Good Hope. We had and the mandate placards put on the Terry Fox statue. It was completely despicable behavior on the part of these individuals. We welcome protesters who are respectful of the law and respectful of our communities. The vast majority of these people in that kind of behavior were not being respectful, and I think we're hurting their cause, quite frankly. Once you get down to 100 spread over 3 shifts of 8 hours a day, it's not a lot of officers. And so while we appreciated every time we saw a Mountie or we saw an OPP officer, we needed the large number of 1,800 to get this situation under control and kick these yahoos out of our city who were disrupting the quality of life of the people of Ottawa. Fast forward, we got what we wanted, and we appreciate the federal government, the provincial government's support. We wanted it sooner because this thing should not have lasted 3 weeks.
You say what was initially described as a peaceful protest has now turned into a siege of our downtown area. And then you say, as of today, there are currently between 400 and 500 trucks occupying Ottawa's downtown core. Then you go on to say these acts in the occupation are having damaging and long-term impacts on the well-being of our residents. People are living in fear and are terrified, and they're now being subjected to the non-stop honking of large trucks for 9 days, which is tantamount to psychological warfare. Then you say, given the scope and scale of the armada of large trucks that are now occupying our downtown core, and this is now on the second page, we are writing to you to ask today for your help to secure 1,800 officers to quell the insurrection that the Ottawa Police Service is not able to contain. And then further down, you say, we must do everything in our power to take back the streets of Ottawa and our parliamentary precinct from the criminal activity and hooliganism that has transpired over the last 9 days. We need your help to end this siege at the heart of our nation's capital and in our residential neighborhoods, and to regain control of our city. So was that description of the situation accurate as to what was happening on the ground as of February 7th?
Absolutely. You know, I think if you just go back and look at the media coverage, the media themselves were being harassed during this whole period of time. We now know that a number of children had to miss chemo and radiation appointments at CHEO. The residents living on those streets having these horns honk literally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, plus the diesel fumes, plus roasting a pig on one street, bonfires, lighting off fireworks, having a dance party. It was showing complete disrespect for the people who lived in the city of Ottawa. And I put that wording in very strongly to let the 2 other orders of government know that we needed their help. Our city's back was against the wall. We had this outrageous behavior by people who seemed to have no respect for private property, public property, or the well-being of the citizens of Ottawa. And my job as mayor was to speak out and say, we have to end this, and the only way we're going to end it is with a significant increase and boost in the number of police officers. Our police service on its own was completely outnumbered. We could not deal with it just as an Ottawa police issue. We needed the support of the other orders of government.
And so you were aware that Chief Slowly had reached out to Commissioner Lucky by this time to ask for more resources. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, you say, well, the Prime Minister asks how you're doing. You say a challenge for everyone, still a pretty unstable situation, nasty people out there that just don't represent Canada. Reminds me of the Republican Party down south. Can't reason with them, so vulgar and hateful, attacking people, ripping masks off, honking their horns. Explain how the discussion with GoFundMe came about and what action was taken.
Well, as you know, the GoFundMe campaign by the organizers was very successful. It was raising millions of dollars, and that was, I think, one of the reasons why more people started to arrive, thinking they would get a cut of that money for their gas and mileage and food and so on, and if they needed places to stay. And so I was approached at some point in that time frame from the consulting firm that represented GoFundMe in Canada to see if I'd be amenable to having a meeting with senior GoFundMe people to discuss and to let them know that the funds they were collecting were very much harming our city and, in my opinion, engaged in illegal activities. Prize pig was Wellington Street. They wanted to have Wellington Street with a flatbed truck and a podium and sound system to denounce the federal government. So if they couldn't have that going on to Queen or Albert or Slater, not much of a backdrop on those streets. So this was very much, I think their intention was to go in and have them with these vulgar flags and swastikas and Confederate flags and so on swirling all over the place with the backdrop of Parliament Hill like they'd taken over the country. People started to realize this was turning into a very volatile situation when we started seeing fireworks going off and hot tubs brought in and the behavior I told you about, those 4 or 5 incidents. And the public who were living here understood fully that this was a horrific situation, and the sooner it got resolved, the better it was for everyone. The end result, albeit a week or two late, we did see unity on the front lines with OPP, Municipal Police Services, and Ottawa Police and RCMP. And as I said, they did what I consider a textbook case of cleaning up a really, really terrible situation. There's a little bit of a urban myth or misconception about what a municipal state of emergency. It has very little impact on public safety. It really is an administrative tool that allows the city, for instance, to bypass the procurement policy of the City of Ottawa. I think it was, in some ways, to give some comfort to the public that, yes, we consider this an emergency, but we were constantly explaining and trying to allow people to understand that this really did not have any impact on the overall removal of individuals. Steve Kanalakis indicating we wanted Ontario and Canada to be involved was that, first of all, we knew that none of the mandates that they were protesting had anything to do with the City of Ottawa or any municipality. They were all provincially run or federally run. Secondly, we did not have the resources. We didn't have enough police officers to continue doing all of the rest of the work of patrolling Ottawa streets. And as you know, we're 2,600 square kilometers, so you couldn't take every officer away from Canada and Orleans and Vanier and so on and put them in the downtown core. So pivot to Ottawa or pivot back to Ontario and Canada was to say, please come to the table. We need your help.
Okay, so 3,000 tickets is a lot. That's a lot of interactions with a lot of protesters. And not a single assaulting a peace officer charge was laid in relation to your bylaw officers.
That's correct.
Is it not true that the protest leaders were actually concerned about maintaining the safety lanes and raised that with you?
They did.
Right. And they wanted to ensure that the lanes were open so that emergency vehicles could always get through?
Correct.
Right. And the protest leaders cooperated with you and the city in maintaining those safety lanes, right?
Yes.
Right. And they maintained them?
For the most part, yes.
Yeah. And when new trucks would even arrive, they even organized to talk with what they refer to as block captains. Did they relay that to you?
No.
All right. But when new vehicles had arrived, to your knowledge, you agree that they always organized to make sure that those safety lanes were open?
Yes.
If the protesters were able to move the vehicles on Tuesday and Wednesday, which is February 15th and 16th, as had been agreed, can you agree that the result would have been most, if not all, of the vehicles would have been cleared out of downtown except for Wellington?
I can't agree with that only because I didn't see a lot of protester vehicles moved except for the ones we allowed onto Wellington. So there seemed to be some movement onto Wellington, but no movement out of the city as was agreed to. So if there would have been a good faith movement on both parts, then I could maybe agree to that, but I can't today.
Right, but isn't it true, and the commission's heard evidence, that the move on to Wellington eventually got blocked?
It got stopped by police, yes.
Right, so it got stopped by the police, so the deal didn't go through because of the police.
Yes.
You said on the 29th you were instructed by OPS not to ticket in the red zone without their okay and accompaniment. On the 28th, approximately how many bylaw or parking enforcement officers were working in the downtown area?
Yeah, I believe that information is in the disclosed material. I don't have that, but it was in the, 10, 15 officers generally work an area, and we would have had that many out that day.
All right. So if those officers were out, they might have needed 10 or 15 police officers accompanying them to do their work in the red zone.
Yes, but on the 28th, that wasn't necessary. Like, it would have been normal practice.
Sure, but going forward, if
Yes.
they needed police accompaniment, that might have meant 15 officers.
It might have. I can't speak to the police operation. They may feel that because of the threat that they would require more than one officer and one bylaw officer to attend those situations.
Sure. I understand that in 2019, the city of Ottawa issued about 350,000 parking tickets. Does that sound about right to you?
That sounds right.
And 250,000 in 2020 due to COVID, I guess, which breaks down to about 20,000 parking tickets per month, or about 10,000 parking tickets every 2 weeks, doesn't it?
You did the math. I'll agree with your math. How's that?
Close-ish. Underestimated. But we've heard that only 1,700 parking tickets or so were issued in downtown during that period of time, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
No, sorry, over 3,000 were issued.
Over 3,000. Still,
Yes.
that's quite a bit less than the normal
Yes.
10,000 or so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ottawa bylaw and parking enforcement officers are trained in dispute resolution and conflict de-escalation, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
And they receive that training because in the ordinary course of business, it's not unusual for ticket recipients to behave in a less than civil manner, isn't it?
Correct.
Right. And on any given day, protest or no protest, it's not unheard of for ticket recipients to get aggressive with enforcement officers, is it?
True.
But no bylaw or parking enforcement officers were attacked or injured by freedom movement protesters, were they?
As I indicated earlier, not that I'm aware of,
Right.
except for the swarming.
And when talking to Commission Council earlier, you discussed the difficulties that the city had obtaining towing services from its standing offer towing contractors and others, and the efforts made to procure towing services. Did the city consider offering increased compensation to towing services to encourage them to provide?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right. Did the city consider buying or leasing heavy tow trucks?
We were looking at all options. You still need to train the drivers, and this was still being viewed as a specific time frame, right? By the time we bought a tow truck and we trained an appropriate driver, that would be one truck, and we needed a lot more than one to execute the final plan.
Right. The city never used its two OC Transpo heavy towing rigs during that period of time, did they?
It did not. Initially, they considered it, but they needed it for their daily operations. The bus system was still running, and the buses were still breaking down and required towing. So, and there were also from the union concerns about safety issues.
All right. You mentioned that heavy towing operators were concerned about driver safety, and that was a big reason why services could not be procured. Light towing operators apparently didn't share those concerns, though, since the city's light towing providers continued to tow vehicles in emergency lanes, didn't they?
Correct.
And there were no incidents of assaults, violence, or injuries to towing operators during the protests, were there?
Not that I'm aware of.
We've rented a giant Airbnb right next to the Trucker Commission of Inquiry. For the whole 6 weeks, we are going to staff it with Rebel News journalists. We're taking shifts. 15 of our reporters are going to cycle through this Ottawa studio, and we are going to cover the Trucker Commission of Inquiry as carefully and comprehensively as we cover the convoy itself. But I need your help. Please go to truckercommission.com to help me cover the extraordinary costs of this important journalistic mission. Thank you.